My name is Jason Medlock, and you're watching Expansion of Consciousness, where we explore the powers of the subconscious mind, learn to reprogram the mind for success using quantum hypnosis, teaching mental strategies for athletes, coaches, and business professionals that produce peak performance. Also using meditation and mindfulness to build more focus. Let's get to it right now.
I want to welcome you to the Transform Your Mindset Bootcamp with the fascination with the human mind. The fascination with consciousness is what drives you.
You cannot miss the fact that mental training techniques roll right in the dynamic of the actual training process. Wow. Good afternoon, and I'm Jason Medlock. Welcome to the Mental Game Plan, where we delve deep into the transformative power of the mind and spirit. We're joined today by Mr. Chris Natski, and he's going to have to help me and make sure I pronounce it correctly, but he's going to forgive me once I get him on here. But Chris is a champion in the world of martial arts, holding an 8th degree black belt and ranking in the top 1% of the martial arts worldwide. He's known as a member at harnessing the champion mindset to inspire breakthrough results in leadership, teamwork, and personal growth. For over 4 decades, Chris has empowered countless individuals and organizations, turning potential into excellence. A former National Taekwondo Champion, respected keynote speaker, seminar leader, life leadership coach, and best-selling author, Chris brings the table of wealth of experience and infectious passion for transforming lives. And we like when people come on and talk about transforming lives. His book, Black Belt Leadership and Breakthrough, have been pivotal in guiding many to find their inner champion. So guys, buckle up as we explore the potential blend of martial arts, philosophy, and actionable leadership strategies that Chris brings to every aspect of life. I'm going to bring Chris on right now, but it is an honor to have him on our show today. Hey there, Chris. How are you?
Great, Jason. How are you?
Good, good. And you know, the fatal mistake in not getting the last name correct, and I apologize, but I want to make sure throughout this show that I know the correct version of it.
It's Natske.
Natske, and I got it.
All right.
And I got it. But Chris, I'm glad you on, and I noticed that the tag says Grandmaster. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, in fact, I was even surprised when that came up. But basically, Grandmaster rank in the martial art of Taekwondo is someone who is 7th degree black belt or above. So if you think about degrees of martial arts and black belt in Taekwondo, 1st through 3rd degree is basically, you know, the fighter. 4th through 6th degree is the teacher, and then 7th through 9th degree would be the philosopher. So that's the rank that I attain 8th degree black belt at this moment.
Wow, that is awesome. And, you know, I'm glad you're on the show, and you and I had a chance to chit chat a little bit about, you know, what the mental game plan is about and what I do. But when you reach that level of Grandmaster, can you just talk a little bit about the mental challenges and some of the things that you had to endure? But not only that, you know, what sort of strategies within that you implement to be able to handle the rigors of this type of designation from a mental aspect?
Well, you know, clearly as we age, our physical skills tend to diminish a bit. You may have experienced that yourself. I certainly have, after doing martial arts now for 50 plus years. And so what ends up happening is we realize that we need to be able to up level and stay balanced within our martial art training within our life. And that means being able to focus on more of the mental game, as you say. And so I do a lot of visualization. I do a lot of meditation in my own world. And, you know, there's so much of it that our physical performance will depend on, in my belief, and I think yours as well, on our mental preparation through visualization, through getting ourselves in that state of where we want to perform at the highest level on the inside before it ever happens on the outside.
And I think visualization is huge, and I write about that in my book. We talked about Empowered by Consciousness, but I have a book called The Mental Game Plan, and it is a comprehensive guide for athletes and coaches on mental training. And visualization is used obviously in hypnosis, but it's a huge part of any person or an athlete's regimen. And they should take it seriously, because even when you're manifesting, visualizing everything to the very detail. And a lot of people are like, yeah, I did visualize myself playing, but what about putting on your uniform? What about when you got to the free throw line in the third quarter and you were trying to get your elbows in the right spot before you release the ball? That level of visualization is required. But I want to ask you this question about the concept of a championship mindset. And could you explain to us how it applies, not just for martial arts, Chris, but in people's everyday lives?
Yeah. Well, in my own life, the reason I use that as a metaphor is at very early in my martial art career, I had started training in 1973. And then my Korean Taekwondo instructor came over to the United States, and I connected with him in 1976. And one of the first times I was in his classroom, I was seated in the back of the room. My legs were spread wide. I was stretching out, getting ready for the day ahead, 13 years old, right? And he came onto the mat, surveyed all the students, and pretty soon I realized he was staring directly at me. And before I could move a muscle, he had come over and sat down in front of me, and he put his right foot on the inside of one leg, left foot on the inside of the other, grabbed the ends of my belt, and with a push-pull, split me out to 180 degrees, right?
Wow.
And so like I always say, there were two life lessons from that experience. Number one is anyone can do the splits once. But the most important part of that interaction is when he looked me in the eyes and he said to me in his broken English, he said, "I will make you a champion. I will make you a champion." Now, when you're 13 years old, all you think about is medals and trophies and all that kind of stuff. But what I realized was, and he talked about it all the time, was about being a champion in life, being able to have a purposeful vision for what we wanted to create, be able to navigate through obstacles with persistence and with grace, and then also take inspired action as a whole part of that. And that's a lot of my work now. And so for me, that championship mindset not only helped me as a collegiate athlete, as we were talking, but also as a martial artist. But then in life, how do you show up as a champion father or spouse or teacher or whatever you choose to be? It's about the champion's mindset, which says that there's a degree of excellence that we're going to achieve. And it's not necessarily about competition. It's about holding ourselves to a standard and doing it in such a way where we're taking those steps each and every day to have that come to fruition.
That's powerful. And when the way I look at it is martial arts, the discipline of martial arts, and it translates, because that's why you see a number of kids, a number of martial arts programs across the entire country. I mean, it translates into your daily life.
Absolutely.
That resiliency, the leadership that martial arts can bring, it empowers people, in my opinion, in a number of ways.
Well, clearly you're speaking to the choir. That's for sure. And in fact, I may be a little biased, but I think that if every child had the opportunity to earn their black belt, our world could be a much better place, because you're not only learning all the things that you were speaking about, which is confidence and the ability to succeed, but you're also doing that in a way of learning respect and courtesy toward others, and learning that, having a martial arts mindset as well as the physical skills. When you realize that you have the physical skills to potentially do damage or harm, that also comes with a sense of temperance and humility as well. So you have the power, you have the confidence, but you also have the temperance in terms of knowing when to use it in the right situation.
Yes. And Chris, a person at your level, you've experienced a number of different athletes and a number of different students that you've had in training and observation. But in your experience, what are some of the common barriers that you see that have prevented individuals from achieving their full potential?
Yeah, I think, I love that question, because in fact, I oftentimes speak about it. I've had the honor to teach probably tens of thousands of people martial arts in the last 5 decades. And I have probably a little over 1,800 of them that have achieved the rank of black belt with me. And when I think about all those students, I can think of only 2 that when they first came to me, they had all the attributes necessary to become a black belt, and they eventually achieved black belt. So focus, concentration, flexibility, explosion, all those things, courage, only 2. Now, one got their 4th degree black belt with me, another one got their 2nd degree black belt. But that means there are another 1,798 that didn't have all those skills at the beginning. And what I found is 2 camps. I found people who maybe were very athletically gifted at the beginning, but they almost got bored with it. There was no challenge to it anymore, right? They could do things so easily. And then I had a large group of people that found it extremely challenging. I mean, they didn't have flexibility. Their body didn't move. They felt awkward, but they kept showing up. And pretty soon they would have those breakthroughs where they all of a sudden they went from, unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence, where they could just do it. And they had this breakthrough, and that catapulted them into their martial arts journey. And what I found is many times the people who had the greatest difficulty at the beginning not only became my best black belts, but they also became my best teachers of martial arts, my best instructors, because they had an empathy for others and what they were going through as well. So I just think having those difficulties at the beginning and being able to break through, we have a saying in martial arts, is a black belt is a white belt that never quit. And so when we are able to have that kind of a mindset and then have that carry over into our everyday lives, it's a real recipe for success.
So that's adopting the championship mindset. This is what helped these individuals overcome,
Absolutely.
The obstacles.
Because it wasn't physical prowess, right? It was a stick-to-itiveness. It was a grit to move through. And it was also, I'd like to say, that we created an environment for them to understand that it was okay to fail and that success would only come from a consistent effort, right? Many times you'll see children in particular and adults as well, that if they come across adversity, it's time to pack it in. But if we're able to teach people that a champion's mindset is about having individual wins along that journey, and we'll have setbacks as well, but to continue moving forward, man, it's a great skill to have in life.
And I always tell my clients, identifying these type areas really is the first step to breaking through them. You know what I mean? And it's really inspiring to hear that mindset that there are a number of people that out here that work in mindset, but it's inspiring to understand and hear from you that mindset shifts can lead to profound changes, and it has for a number of your students.
Totally. And I would add, Jason, it's not just a mindset of the end goal and being successful in it, like seeing yourself on the medal stand or seeing yourself lifting the trophy. I think that's important, but I'm a huge believer in having a positive mindset and visualization about the process. Yes. About what are the daily activities that you're going through, talking about, like you said, the guy at the free throw line where he's got his elbows and in his perfect shooting position. And I also think it's important, and I did this in my own career as a competitor, is I also trained for the potential setbacks and how I was going to react if it did occur. So case in point, in 1999, when I won the National Taekwondo Championships, I went into that tournament with a hamstring injury. And wouldn't you know it, in the 3rd round of the first match, I throw a spin kick, the guy blocks it, and I feel my hamstring go. So now I've got, many more fights in order to hit the championship rounds. And but I had visualized that in advance of how, through hypnosis, as a matter of fact, how I was going to deal with that setback if it occurred. So I got myself wrapped up. I went into a meditative state. I went back to those visualizations I had done, and I'm happy to say I didn't get scored on the rest of the tournament, and I won. And I know that if I wouldn't have prepared in that way, had that injury occurred, I probably would have lost it mentally. Thinking I couldn't have made it through because, one of my best weapons just went away. So, being able to prepare for the difficulties is so important for us as well.
And Chris, you're the first guest I've had that has actually used hypnosis on themselves and can talk about the way they use it in competition. Can you talk about how you felt after using it over and over and over and applying? How did you feel, and what triggered you to be able to use it at the time of the highest level of anxiety, and right when you need to perform at the highest level as well?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, the genesis of that story is I knew I needed to do something differently for that year, because the prior year I made it all the way to the medal round, the gold medal match, and I lost in 1998. And there was something about it that just wasn't there for me. Physically, in my humble opinion, I was a better physical athlete than the person that defeated me. He didn't hurt me, he outpointed me, right? But I knew I needed to change something. And so one of the things I did was, through that visualization and that hypnotic process, was I not only did it for my preparation in terms of every one of my trainings that I would do prior to that, I would mentally rehearse before I got on the mat to train. And then that day, I had already visualized what it would feel like to put on my uniform, what it would feel like to move around and begin to get a good sweat in, and what the ambiance was going to be like. And then, as I said, I really trained on what would happen. I trained about the things that I knew I could best score with, but also what would happen if I had a setback. And having that as a background, there was, of course, a little panic right at the beginning when I felt my injury occur. But what it allowed me to do is get into this calm state and get back into a positive mindset of what I wanted to occur. So not focusing on what went wrong, but on focusing on what could indeed go right going forward. And that's basically what it did for me. I just had this confidence that I probably didn't. If that would have happened the year before, I may have lost the ensuing match, and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
And in other words, it's not the emotion itself, but how you choose to handle it.
Oh, it's so true. In fact, I often tell my clients, Jason, it's like emotions are not bad.
No.
Well, it's energy in motion, right? What we want to do is we want to be able to redirect it. It's like that scientific study where they looked at the brain and they were giving people specific emotions, like, are you happy, you sad, et cetera. And they noticed that the brain lit up in a very specific way for every emotion. And then they came upon anxiety, and it lit up in a very specific way. But then they went further on and they noticed there was another emotion that lit the brain up in the exact same way as anxiety. And it was excitement. Excitement. So imagine now the next time you're in that state where you're feeling anxious, what if you were able to tell yourself, wow, I must be excited about this, right? I do this when I train speakers, and now it becomes transformational and it becomes a positive energy that you can direct the way you want it to versus holding you back.
Wow. Chris, you've intertwined martial arts principles with leadership in some of your programs I was reading. Can you share how physical disciplines influence mental and emotional growth?
Yeah, I think, I'm, as I say, I'm often a little bit biased on this, but I think that being able to have control and a strength in our body temples, if you will, what it does is it has this amazing transformational aspect to bleeding over into other parts of our lives, into our mental acuity, into our emotional acuity, into our spiritual acuity. Because when we're physical beings, we move, right? Our bodies were meant to move. And when we have a tendency of trying to just do it all mentally, what happens, at least from my experience, is it doesn't anchor as well. But when we do things, that are anchoring those feelings through our physical motion, now it's a holistic approach to how we're going to achieve something. And like I said, one of the things I do corporately is I do board breaking experiences. Okay. So I'll go into corporations and do that. And you will literally see a transformation in front of you when someone literally breaks through that board, particularly if they went into that situation with less than a positive mindset or having a fear about it. Particularly, I'll see a lot of women do that. But man, when they go through it, oh my gosh, you see the transformation because everything we've been talking about got anchored in a physical execution.
Wow, that's fascinating. Just fascinating to see the interplay between the physical, the psychological, and the holistic, and but especially through the lens of martial arts. And that's just such a rich tradition that you can follow. Man, just absolutely outstanding. But could you talk us through maybe a success story where someone utilized your black belt leadership principles to transform their personal or their professional life?
Well, let's see. I've got several. I'll use this example that I often use with young kids. This was a high school student of mine, and his name was Nabil. Nabil came to me. He had transferred to our school. He and his mom and sister lived in Southern California. He probably came to our studio about 8 or 9 years old. He had trained in California previously. And I think if you even ask Nabil to this day, he wasn't that well of a skilled martial artist. But he just kept showing up. He just kept showing up. And after a couple, 3 years, he eventually got his black belt with us. But he didn't stop there. He started going for a second degree black belt. And then eventually he became a staff member of mine. So he was teaching classes. And one thing I neglected to say, he had tried out for our demonstration team on 3 different occasions. And we were pretty good in the day. We traveled all over the state of Colorado, and he didn't make it till his third try. So this was a kid that just knew how to show up and be mentally tough. Well, he had a dream that he wanted to attend the Colorado School of Mines, which is one of the top engineering schools in the Western United States. And I had known this about him, and he was now in his senior year of high school. Parents loved him. He was a great staff member. I walk in the school though one day, and he's at the front desk, and he's got less than a happy face. He's normally a really, exuberant young man. And he says, "Sir, can we go in the office and talk?" And so we sit down. He proceeds to tell me that he got a rejection letter from the Colorado School of Mines. Apparently, he had gotten a C in chemistry his sophomore year of high school, right? So we talked about his plan, and his plan was to go to another university in Colorado to get his grades up and take prerequisites and then reapply to School of Mines his sophomore year. Well, thought that was a great plan. 2 weeks later, though, I come back into the school, and there he is again at the front desk. And he asks if we can have a meeting. So we sit down, and he proceeds to tell me the story that on his own account, as a 17-year-old young man, he directly called the admissions director at Colorado School of Mines to have a meeting with him to see what he needed to do to get in the next year. And during this meeting, he's talking about his passions, his martial arts. He's being Nabil now. He's a positive, uplifting young man. And in the middle of a sentence, the admissions director holds up his hand and says, "Stop right there." So Nabil thinks he's going to get thrown out of the office. And he says, "Stop right there, young man. I'm admitting you to the Colorado School of Mines right now. Don't you ever get a C in chemistry again." And Nabil eventually went on, graduated. Now he's working in the petroleum industry. But the fact of the matter is as a young man at 17, he had the mental fortitude, the vision and the courage to stand up for what he really wanted to do. And I know that martial arts had a great deal because he shared that with me, and he was able to achieve his dream. So I think that's just I love that story. It still gives me goosebumps, and it probably happened 20 years ago.
Wow. And it's stories like that, Chris, that are just motivating. I mean, they are a testament, really, like you just said with the martial arts, it's a testament to the practicality of your teachings. And, when you sit down with people at that age, and when you have such a high frequency, and people can feel your frequency and it elevates them. And I tell people and clients all the time, when you are practicing hypnosis and you're practicing mindset and you're trying to learn different techniques to reprogram the subconscious mind, you still have to do this with a strong intention.
Yes.
But not only that, your frequency, your mood, your attitude needs to be at a high level so you can receive the training. So I see that in that young man, and I can only imagine how he sat in there with all the things that you taught him within your program and was just impressive.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it made me think of something I speak a lot to both. I speak to corporate clients about this. And when I go and I speak to teenagers, is many of us live our lives from a perspective of have, do, be. When I have enough money, then I'll do what I want to do and I'll be happy. Right.
Right.
But the people that have really got it going turn those words around. They look at life from a perspective of be, do, have. So if you want more love, if you want more collaboration, if you want more abundance, start being that way, then do the things that support that way of being, and then you can have what you want.
Wow. And this next topic, I want to move to your book, and it fits right in your book, Breaking Through. Chris, you outlined 3 winning strategies for creating breakthrough results. Could you elaborate on, at least one of these strategies?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll do all 3.
Let's do it.
So I'm so glad you asked, because it's one of the things I'm probably most passionate about. And this book came out of my experience of doing the board breaking experience corporately. And there's one organization here in Denver that I do it annually at, and I would usually see people either in Denver or I would see them at the annual conference, and I'd ask them how they were doing on their breakthrough, because they literally would write them on their boards on one side, and the other side, the limiting belief or beliefs that have been holding them back. And then they break through the limiting belief. And so I would say about 50% of the time, I'd hear these amazing stories of how people had breakthroughs even beyond what they had established. And then the other 50% of the time, I had people that were like, the board's still in my office and I love it. It was a great experience, but they weren't able to do it. So I thought, how do I create a vehicle for them, a tool for them to have the breakthrough? So that's what came through with the book, Breaking Through. And the 3 C's basically is, the first C is to clarify your vision. It's to get really clear on what you want to create. And I even talk about in the book, many of us are really good at expressing what we don't want to have happen, right? You'll ask someone, I'll ask a coaching client, what do you really want to have happen in your life? And they'll be a little unclear. And they'll say, what don't you want to have happen? And man, they're clear on that. So we flip that around so they get a clarification on their vision. And then the next thing is, and this is pretty practical, but to create a plan is the next C. And that basically means, what are the behaviors? What are the strategies? What are the mental and spiritual things that you're going to do that are going to move you ahead on a consistent basis? So it's one thing to have a plan. It's, how many people do New Year's resolutions and then they stuff them in their, the top drawer and they don't see them until the next year. But have a plan, and then it takes us to the third, which is to take consistent action. Mm-hmm. With that plan, what are the things that you're doing on a daily, a weekly, a monthly basis in order to make that plan come to fruition? So it's taking about those 3 C's and having them work together in concert so that you can have the breakthrough results that you want.
I love it. I do something similar, but it's the same thing. No need of splitting hairs. I like what you're talking about. Do you have a copy of your book right by you?
I happen to have a copy of it right here.
There it is, guys. Breaking Through. Okay. Each strategy, I'm sure, has the potential to be a game changer.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. How does the process of breaking a board in your workshop, how does that serve as a metaphor for overcoming personal challenges?
Yeah. It's very interesting. I don't know how many hundreds of people, maybe thousands, that have gone through this program to this point. And it's interesting because on one level, I see, and I've done it as young as middle schoolers as well, which is a really powerful experience that I may share a story of that in a moment. But number one is that the physical obstacle that lies before acts as a metaphor for the obstacle that's been going on in their mind, sometimes conscious, but many times subconscious, right? Sometimes people aren't even aware, but when you ask them, and I've had the same experience, you have something intentionally you want to do, and then life happens and you keep running into the same obstacles over and again. And the one common denominator is you, because you're always there, right? So what are those limiting beliefs? So in the process of those seminars, we don't just, teach you how to break a piece of wood. what we do is I take them through and they ask themselves some very systematic questions about what their limiting beliefs are. What's their big why? What's the implication if they don't achieve their breakthrough in their life and in the lives of others? So there's a little leverage behind them. And then when they go up and they break that board, it is like this physical metamorphosis, if you will. It acts as a symbol for them to have this. And then the empowerment that comes through, particularly with people who have a little bit of apprehension. And this is my, just through observation, I think that in general, the ladies come up and not knowing if they have the physical prowess to do it, if they have the physical strength. The guys come up just as nervous because they're thinking, I got the strength, but that lady just broke the board. What if I mess up and I don't break it, right? And so it becomes this huge breakthrough for them. And one of my favorite stories, and I write about it quite a bit in the book, is I had a woman, we had a group of about 50 or 60 here in the Denver area, and everyone in the room had now broken the board. And she was the only one that had not. So I took the board from the board holder and I was coaching her through. And she had plenty of strength, but she kept hitting it off center. Well, I realized later on, she shared with me that she had multiple sclerosis. And so she wasn't able to put her hand precisely where she needed it to be. So anyway, she's now tried maybe a dozen times over the course of the seminar. And she bounces off it the second time with me. And I lean over and I whisper to her, I say, Debbie, I'm going to be here all weekend for this conference. If we don't do it this next time, we'll just do it privately on our own. We'll get this broken for you this weekend. Well, as soon as I said that, I saw her anchor in. She got super focused. She reared back and bam, crack, the board went. And Jason, the entire place just bolted to their feet, standing ovation. Tears are streaming down her eyes. She jumps into my arms. It was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. So in that instant, what happened is she not only had that for herself, but I know from talking with other people, seeing her go up against her fear was inspiring for the entire room. And it was better than if everyone would have broken the board on the first time. Does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense.
That process was so inspiring.
It makes a ton of sense. I mean, using symbolism of breaking through physical barriers to represent overcoming life's challenges, that's potent.
Yes.
And it's a vivid illustration that I'm sure leaves a lasting impression.
Yes.
Wow. So let's talk about leadership and how often can leadership be seen as a solitary role?
Well, it certainly can be, but what I would say to that is first of all, in my opinion, leadership is something that starts from the inside and then goes outward. So it starts with what I would call self-leadership. We have to be able to do the work ourselves. We have to be able to look at our dark sides and be able to accept them and love them and then break through those as well. And when we're walking the talk, now leadership becomes something that I believe becomes second nature, because some leaders are very vocal, as you probably know in your sports history. Some are just guys and gals that just go to work and they lead through example. Yeah. But when you have that steadiness inside of you, now what happens is you're emanating leadership. It's not something you're necessarily just saying, although sometimes great leaders are very vocal, but it emanates from you because people can feel it around you. And then I also love a part about leadership, which it's not just about creating followers. It's about creating other leaders. And so when we have that as our intention, now that loneliness maybe isn't as great because we're developing personal relationships with the people that we're leading. I also think it's important for leaders to seek out other leaders, either to be coached by or to have as peers, so that they can be talking about the challenges that they're dealing with and get the support that they need. One of the things I learned early on as a leader, as I was not only a leader in the corporate world, but then I was when I was running my martial arts school and then my organization that has multiple schools, is that 100% strength comes from 100% vulnerability. So when we are vulnerable as leaders, I think it up-levels our leadership ability, right? But it also, when we're vulnerable enough to ask for help where we need it, it not only gives the people we're leading permission to ask for help as well, but it also creates a stronger bond with our peers that can help us through the most challenging of times.
Wow. So Chris, how do you integrate communication and teamwork into your leadership coaching?
Well, communication is incredibly powerful. And I think I've already spoke a little bit about that. It's about communicating honestly with yourself. In my first book, I talk a lot about integrity, but integrity isn't just about being honest with other people. It's about truly being honest with yourself, right? And if you mess up, own up to it. If you have setbacks, embrace those, right? But being able to have that, integrity in its essence isn't just about our word. It's also about the structural integrity. So the buildings that you and I are both sitting in, whether our homes or office buildings, there's a structural integrity to it. And that starts with our word. Now, it's not only about us keeping our word, right? But it's also about, it's when we're not able to keep our word, is that we honor our word. When we mess up, we communicate it. If we need to renegotiate something we promised we're going to do, we have that as our way of being. And now what happens is the people around us, either our peers or the people that we're leading, there's a trust that develops. And that communication now has two clear lines versus kind of playing with things where maybe we're kind of sidestepping things. And I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying I always do it, but I think that honesty and that straightforwardness, that's what really is the essence of a tremendous leader.
Yeah, but you are a teacher, coach. You've worked with athletes. You've worked with, just students, and to have that as one of the bedrocks of your program, I love it. And I think that people who will be looking at this, that you're speaking to, will understand the integrity of that portion of it. But let's go to something fun. And I know you've accomplished the Camino de Santiago.
Yes, I have.
And that's a 500-mile walk. Okay.
Yes.
How has your personal adventures influenced your teachings?
Oh my gosh. Well, this was a pleasant surprise. I didn't know we were going to be talking about this, but it's literally the anniversary of my 10-year anniversary of walking the Camino de Santiago. So for those of your listeners, you mentioned it briefly there that aren't familiar with it. It's a 500-mile walk across northern Spain. Starts in western France and then goes over all the way across Spain into Santiago de Compostela. And boy, it was one of the most transformational times in my life. They say that most people, if not all people, the way they do the Camino is the way they do life. The way they do the Camino is the way they do life. And so one of the biggest lessons that I learned was the power in slowing down and being present. I spent the first 2 weeks of the Camino literally treating it like an athletic endeavor. That's my comfort zone, right? I'm going to go from point A to point B. I'm going to get up early in the morning. I'm going to start out strong. I'm going to, you know what I mean? And it was like an athletic endeavor. And then about halfway through the Camino, I was walking through a village very early in the morning because I like to start early. And the name for pilgrims that are on the Camino is the peregrinos. So I walk past this doorway in this building, and it says refuge for the peregrinos. So I walk about 10 paces and then I stop and I go, that's interesting. And I walk back and I go in, I'm getting ready to go inside. And all of a sudden my monkey mind starts and it says, it's probably a tourist trap, Chris. And, you're going to be off schedule. And, you said you're going to be at this place by this time. So I back up and I continue on my way. Well, a day or two later, I go into a restaurant for dinner and I see a number of Americans and Canadians who I'd interacted with a couple of days before. And they see me and they wave and they invite me to sit down with them. And as soon as I sit down, the American to my left from San Francisco says, hey, let's talk about the most impactful things that we've experienced on the Camino to date. He goes, I'll start. He said, did anyone ever see the day or two ago, the refuge for the peregrinos? He goes, man, I went in there and it was so amazing. They sat me down. They gave me tea. There was soft music playing. There was a fireplace. I read books. They gave me cookies. He goes, it was the most nurturing experience I had on the Camino. Now I'm sitting at the head of the table and I'm looking like Fred Flintstone. Remember in the cartoon when he would shrink, right in front of everyone? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I am missing my experience here. I'm not slowing down enough to experience everything. I'm just thinking about going to my next destination. And so what I did is I fessed up, number one, and then I made a commitment the last 2 to 2.5 weeks was to slow it down. And that's when I started to see magic happen on the Camino.
And it's just like any other athletic endeavor that you experience. And if you have success, and if you don't, it's incredibly transformative.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that this experience was incredibly transformative to you. And, when you're linking these personal milestones to sort of professional growth, this can be very enlightening for people that are listening, for you, for anyone who's ever attempted to, live out their dream. Maybe it's a marathon, and maybe it's some sort of accomplishment, a hole-in-one, playing golf. It can be enlightening, and that's why I picked, when I was reading through, I'm like, yeah, I want to ask him this question.
Yeah. And if I may add, those athletic endeavors, they're powerful. I mean, I've been my life as an athlete, as I believe you have as well. But the one thing I would say is that experience taught me to be present in the moment, right? And then also, as we're on these journeys, whether it's a marathon, whether it's getting your black belt, you're a collegiate athlete, whatever, you're a competitive athlete, make sure that you're appreciating the journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people, your coaches, your teammates, the people that maybe you're teaching, make sure that you're valuing and slowing down enough to value those relationships. Be driven, be focused, go for your goals. Absolutely. But make sure you're appreciating what's going on in the present moment.
So what would be your number one piece of advice for that person that's starting their journey?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's be intentional on where you want to go. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Slow down enough so that you can appreciate what's going on. And then also be stubborn in your goals, but flexible in your methods, right? Because there's going to be things that come up that may take you off track. And it's easy. I often tell my students, if a plane takes off from Denver on its way to, let's say, Honolulu, Hawaii, and that flight is off only 1% in terms of its flight path, after that 5-6 hour flight, they don't end up in Hawaii, they end up in New Zealand. What happens is it continues to, spread the longer you go. So make sure that when you're on those journeys is that you're taking time to reevaluate, get yourself back on course. I have a good friend of mine who's a retired pilot for United, and he's told me a number of times that 99% of the time that he's in flight, that plane is off course because of wind, altitude, whatever. So it's constant adjustments, but you don't always know the best adjustments if you're not being present to what's going on in the present moment.
I love that analogy. So you have friends that do things like that, and you're just saying, "Oh, I'm gonna write about that. I'm gonna put it." Right. So let's learn about you, not in the way that we've already learned, but let's talk about the website. Let's talk about the actual programs you offer. Let people know where to find you. Tell the audience how they can find you, and what you're offering.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking that. So they can find me at my website, www.chrisnatske.com. So it's just my name is one word, ChrisNatzke.com. What you'll see on there is my various speaking programs. So I do keynote, inspirational speaking, also do the board breaking experience, which I've shared. I do life leadership and business coaching. So there's a whole element there. And in fact, if anyone is interested, I'm starting a new, what I call the Breaking Through Coaching Program, which is a 6-week intensive coaching program, group coaching program, where we do both group coaching and individual coaching. And I'm looking to begin that at the very beginning of June. So if they go to my website, they can literally click on the banner that talks about it. And if it looks like something they're interested in, they can literally set up an appointment, a Zoom call with me to see if the program's right for them.
Awesome. One more time, the website?
ChrisNatzke.com, ChrisNatzke.com. N as in Navy, A-T-Z as in zebra, K-E.com, all one word, chrisnatski.com.
Awesome. And I want people to, and particularly people who are looking for this level of discipline, athletes, you know, I don't do every aspect of everything when it comes to mental fortitude, mental training. I mean, there are other professionals out there, and that's why I'm glad to have you on to talk about some of the things that you've been able to do. But looking ahead, what new projects or new initiatives are you excited about in the near future?
Well, you know, I love the work that I do. And so I love being able to go out and inspire audiences. I just did a virtual talk on Sunday. I've got people I'm going to be working with here in the months of June and July. And so I love being out on the road and being able to share that message. I love doing the board breaking experience. Also, if people check me out, I have a what I call the Mind of a Champion tip of the week. So it's a Facebook Live that happens every Tuesday at 11:30 Mountain Time. So I guess that would be 1:30 Eastern on Facebook Live. And I also put that up on LinkedIn. And so I love being able to share that message in little bits so that people can take those nuggets and use them in their lives. So it's really, I'm kind of doing my dream job as usual, right? You know, I started in the corporate world, went on to open up my own martial arts school because that's still my passion. But I wanted to take the things I was doing in the dojo, and bring them out in the world and what I'm doing. So it's really just continuing that path.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Do you have any words of encouragement, any last words that you'd like to leave with this audience before we get out of here?
Well, one of the taglines that I use in my business is, and it's one that's a staple in the martial arts, is a champion doesn't need to be told what to do. They just need to be reminded. But I spell remind, RE-MIND. So the first element of that is to remember that there is a champion inside of you. There's a power inside of you that you may not even be aware of, that's stronger than you could ever know. And then number two is we constantly have the ability to remind our own consciousness by what we focus on and the beliefs we intend to embrace. So you have the ability to change your mind. And when you can change your mind, you can change your life.
Awesome. Oh, you just had me stuck right there. I'm like, wow. And that's a good message, strong message. And for people who have the championship spirit in their heart and in their minds, they will receive that profoundly. Absolutely. Okay, so Chris, thank you so much. I'm gonna move you to the back. I'm gonna continue to say some good things about you. You don't want to miss that part, but I appreciate you. Just hang in there 1 second and I'll be right back to you.
Sounds good, my friend. Thank you.
All right. All right. Wow. Okay. Chris, I mean, thank you. Just thank you profoundly. First off, just for sharing your wisdom with the audience of the mental game plan and the energy that you have with us. And it was fantastic. It's been really enlightening to just have this discussion today. And it's been filled with powerful insights and actionable advice that I'm sure the listeners will carry forward in their everyday lives. And for those of you inspired by today's conversation, I encourage you to connect with Chris. Check out his workshops, read his books. I'm gonna get his book. I know that. I may twist his arm to see if he'll give me a copy, but I'm gonna buy his book. But perhaps even step into the journey of finding your own inner champion, just like he just said, through his coaching programs. You can find all of this and more on his website, and all of his information will be in the show notes. But embrace the championship mindset and watch as your life transforms. And don't forget to subscribe to the Mental Game Plan. You can catch us on YouTube at the Mental Game Plan, and also subscribe to us on Instagram. I put a lot of information on Instagram at the Mental Game Plan with 2 N's. And we're also on Twitter at the Mental Game Plan with 2 N's. There are people that are taking the name up. But if you're interested in more episodes that empower you and help elevate your mind and spirit, check us out. Okay. And also share this episode with anyone you know is on their path to leadership, to changing their mindset using hypnosis, using a number of different techniques to enhance their personal experiences. And I want to thank you for joining us and keep pushing the boundaries of your consciousness. And remember, every challenge is an opportunity to grow and excel. Until next time, stay inspired, guys, and keep striving to be your personal best. And I'm out. And there are 3 words I want to leave you with: trust, relax, and discover. Thank you.